We believe we're right in the middle of the biggest transition humanity's ever faced, which is the energy transition. And the way that we have consumed energy has actually resulted in the environmental crisis that we're facing right now.
And it became clear that simply calculating Scope 1 and Scope 2 and offsetting Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emission is no longer enough to serve the true purpose of carbon neutrality.
Welcome to Business on Air, a podcast hosted by Microsoft. I'm your host, Fred, National Technology Officer from Microsoft Hong Kong. Today, we have a pleasure of welcoming Giuliana from Schneider Electric and Billy from SGS to talk about sustainability. I'm sure all of you agree that sustainability is good for our world as well as our business. Specific action by governments, business, and citizens to reduce environmental impacts are top of mind. With the Hong Kong government's 2015 Climate Action Plan, there's a renewed focus what each of us in Hong Kong can do to achieving carbon neutrality in order to help our planet. Our focus today's podcast is on what business can do to advance their sustainability goals. At Microsoft, we announced our sustainability commitment in January 2020 to becoming a carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste company by 2030. Implementing these commitments is a journey. We have come to see that as the 3 R's, which are recording, reporting, and reducing journey. If you are not familiar with these 3 R's, here is a quick explanation. First, recording. After setting your sustainability commitment, like what Microsoft has done, you need to track progress against your goals. You must be able to monitor and record the emission data from our operations for further analysis to support our sustainability programs and actions. Second, reporting. Once we record the emission data, we need to report this in a consistent manner to meet our compliances and governance requirements. We publish our annual sustainability report normally in March time every year to report all the sustainability data that we record for the year in order to share with our customers and partner what's our progress and also our learning so that people can learn from what we have done. In Hong Kong, listed companies are required to report an ESG report as well. This is not only just give you data-driven insights on how you're doing, how you're performing on carbon reduction based on what you have recorded. It also helps you to meet certain regulatory requirements. Lastly, reduce. After all this important information are collected and reported, you must be able to use this data and report and provide us an insight on the area of focus that we can take appropriate actions to reduce emissions. These 3 R's are critical and go hand in hand to provide a clear, precise, and accurate plan on actions for your sustainability agenda. In this episode, we'll focus on the 3 R's: record, report, and reduce. I sit down with leaders from 2 Microsoft partners who are committed to help business in Hong Kong on their sustainability journey. Hi, Giuliana and Billy. Welcome to Business on Air. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Hi, Fred. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Giuliana. I work for Schneider Electric, and I lead the sustainability business for Schneider here in the region. The sustainability business is a global division with a mission to bring all of Schneider X together to provide unprecedented end-to-end support to our customers to achieve their sustainable transformations. So we help corporates formulate climate strategies, digitize operations, and deploy decarbonization solutions.
Great. Billy?
Hi, Fred. Hi, Giuliana. I'm the Deputy Director of Knowledge Solution in SGS Hong Kong. SGS is a company providing independent testing, inspection, and certification business to our customers. We usually only do B2B business, but over the year in dealing with COVID-19 the public start to recognize SGS as we are responsible for doing the face mask testing and also the healthcare product for them. In Knowledge Solutions, I'm responsible for the sustainability business segment from greenhouse gas accounting, green finance verification, green building certification to ESG disclosure and reporting. We have a team of auditors and verifiers in Hong Kong specialized for our sustainability business. And we also supported by the technical expert from other global SGS network. It's my pleasure to be here and for this episode of Business of Nair.
Wow, great. So sounds like Microsoft, Schneider Electric, and SGS have long histories and we are active in the area of sustainability. So for example, at Microsoft, we have sustainability built into every aspect of our business, from the way we operate to product design and to the service we offer to our customers. And we have also announced the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability Solution Platform, if you like, to provide a comprehensive, integrated, and automated management platform for organizations at any stage of their sustainability journey. So can you share with us how you model sustainability and how can help customers to achieve these goals?
At SGS, sustainability is one of our 6 business principles. It guides us the culture and the way we do business with our customers. Similar to Microsoft, SGS also released our annual corporate sustainability report back in February. This is our 4th sustainability report since our first release in 2018. Regarding our service, we introduced sustainability solutions to the market since the 1990s. Back then, our service are mainly focused on environmental compliance, human rights auditing, and other social responsibility initiatives. In year 2000, so we start providing sustainability report assurance service, support our clients in building the greenhouse gas inventories, and also involved in their disclosure exercise. As of today, we are providing a broad range of solutions to support customers to implement sustainability in their own organization and across their supply chain. We categorize our solution into 6 sustainability pillars. Those related to natural resources, related to energy productions, infrastructures, living, and also the business practice. This is the 6 pillars that we have as our framework, though.
Here at Schneider, we are very, very similar to Microsoft and SGS as well. We also have sustainability embedded into our business, actually for more than a decade, almost 15 years now. It is embedded in the sense from our purpose. So our purpose is to empower all to make the most of our energy and resources, bridging progress and sustainability for all. It is also embedded in our mission as a company, which is to be your digital partner for sustainability and efficiency. And day to day, we continue to accelerate our commitment to sustainability on 2 fronts, what I usually call it 2 sides of the same coin. So on one hand, we continue to lead by examples in our own ecosystem. So we set very concise, very comprehensive, short and long-term commitments across ES&G, very much like both your organizations. And often we go beyond the scope to act for a climate positive world as well. On the other side of the coin, which is where I sit, we also created a sustainability business. It's created not only to meet evolving customer needs, but we know that we need to do something more than being amazing practitioners ourselves in sustainability, but we need to dedicate our efforts to help multiply our impact and help others to accelerate on their decarbonization journeys as well. So there's definitely a lot of similarity between our organizations.
Great. At Microsoft, actually use the 3 R's, namely record, report, and reduce journey framework to guide our customers on their sustainability journey by our cloud solutions. For example, the first 2 R's, record and report, data collection and reporting are often cited as a hurdle. For Microsoft Azure and our Microsoft 365 users, we actually provide a dashboard to allow them to track and report Scope 1 direct and Scope 2 and 3 indirect carbon emissions of their workloads on our cloud service. So how are companies in Hong Kong managing maybe start with recording first. I think recording been a challenge as well. So how company in Hong Kong are managing this recording challenge and what solution that both your companies can offer to help them?
I think first question is actually what do companies in Hong Kong need to record, right? So on top of Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, which is your GHG emissions,
For the sake of those audience who are not familiar with some of the terminology that we actually use in this episode, I would like to explain to you what this Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 means. Scope 1 refers to a direct emissions made by company through their business operations. For example, emission from the company's building and their fleet, their car, their transportations as well. Scope 2 refers to indirect emissions that is normally referred to the energy sources like electricity or gas resources that the company use to support their operations. Scope 3 is more broader category. It refers to emissions contributed by their entire supply chain, whereas the upstream supply chain or downstream supply chain, even from the product that they make, which produce emissions through the life cycle of the product. So that's a big one.
Actually, what do companies in Hong Kong need to record, right? So on top of Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, which is your GHG emissions, there are actually a bunch of ESG data that companies also need to record for various reasons. For example, they need to record on their gender diversity, the amount of training they've given their staff, health and safety metrics, and a lot of the data that they need to record are actually mandatory. For example, 90% of carbon emission or energy use in Hong Kong is to do with buildings, and the EMSD mandates energy audits once every 10 years, and that data, that energy benchmarking data, actually gets published to the public. So, the first question I think every company struggles or faces a challenge is what is the data that is important to them that they need to record? And then secondly, I think very quickly people would jump straight to, what technology do we use to record it? Well, actually, of course, they can consider something as sophisticated as the solutions you just mentioned. But, a simple spreadsheet sometimes does the job as well to record information. But the issue that companies always run into is, what is the process behind the recording of the data, and how do you define the data owners to know what's the best way to do this kind of recording? And one of the issues that we see a lot of companies face these days, especially as we're right in the middle of the COVID crisis and the fifth wave, is the lack of resource, because the recording of data actually in Hong Kong and a lot of the time is still very manual. And and there is a lack of automation, for example, in buildings, a lack of automated metering devices that allow them to record this information automatically instead of, by hand and taking down the numbers on meters. So it's heavily reliant on individuals. So I think digitization itself, digitization of operations, really allows for consistency in the record of data, and it removes this heavy dependent on human resource and removes human error as well. So, I think digitizing data collection and recording is the best way to tackle this challenge.
Giuliana makes a great point. It's more than just a recording any and all data. You need to focus on collecting the right data using whatever method, technology, or software that's currently available to you.
Back in the days, it is somewhat become common practice for many organizations to include only their operational emissions in their carbon neutrality exercise, which is what we refer to as Scope 1 and Scope 2, as Fred mentioned. But people start to realize Scope 3 emission indeed represent, in many cases, the largest portion of the total greenhouse gas emissions. Various study and some of the cases that we have on hand tell us that Scope 3 emission represent more or less 70%, 80% of the total corporate greenhouse gas emissions. And it become clear that simply calculating Scope 1 and Scope 2 and offsetting Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emission is no longer enough to serve the true purpose of carbon neutralities. But measuring Scope 3 emission is not an easy task, as you can imagine that these emissions are not under the direct control of the corporations. It is distributed across many different individual tiers of suppliers in many different countries. It can be difficult and time-consuming to collect the data and to ensure the integrity of the data. Part of the solution is to adopt the IoT from Schneider Electric, but also it requires training and education to the suppliers, centralized platforms to record the use of electricity, how much diesel, LPG are used, the many miles per day run by the delivery trucks, and how much waste are produced, such that at the end of the day, the corporation will have an overview of the overall greenhouse gas emission they have for planning their carbon reduction roadmap and for budgeting towards carbon neutral.
Recording data is already a challenge. I think that's also another challenge to actually how we report this information. The carbon footprint and carbon emission reporting has been also a challenge as well. So what's your view on that? Why is those so challenging, and what solution we can offer to help our customer to achieve that?
We are seeing an increasing amount of sustainability report being published every year, not just from the listed company, but also all big corporations are trying to tell the other stakeholder what they are doing and what they have done regarding ESG topics. It's a good thing to see corporation report on their sustainability progress and their challenge, such that different organizations can learn from each other and to compare with themselves. When we talk to our ESG reporting customers, there are a few common reporting demands from their stakeholder. First, there are increasing demand for more accurate data being reported openly and transparently. Investors are hoping to get more insight from the report to make investment decisions. That being said, around 50% of the company issuing a sustainability report using independent verifiers for a second party or for a second party opinion of the report, which will give more credibility of the report. Second is the importance of scope 3 emission, as we just mentioned it, and the reduction roadmap throughout the supply chain. There are more than 2,500 global companies with their science-based emission reduction target listed yet at the SBTi platform and already committed to a reduction timeline. So in order to stay on top of the competitions and respond to external demands, committing to scope 3 emission reduction is no longer a voluntary exercise for these corporations. There will be also anti-corruption, labor and human rights, climate change, according to TCFD. These are some of the major disclosure requests of now. But until today, it is more or less up to the corporation to choose what ESG-related activity to disclose in their report. And there are increasing demand to create a consistency on what to be put into the report as well.
We refresh our sustainability strategy every 3 years, and we publish our progress against our strategy every quarter. But what we are seeing from the clients that we serve from a reporting perspective, I think Billy's covered it very, very well. But just the two things I think is quite common. I think first, there's the mandatory reporting that needs to be done. So in Hong Kong specifically, there are a couple of mandatory reporting frameworks, like the EMSD one that I mentioned earlier, but also, Hong Kong Stock Exchange has some ESG guidelines that companies need to follow. I think the question mark there for me is, how do we get meaningful data out of those mandatory reportings? And how can the government actually improve, or these regulatory bodies improve on their requirements? For example, improve the Building Energy Code or improve the ESG guidelines so that investors and the public can get more meaningful data out of what companies are reporting today. And then on the other hand, there's what Billy mentioned, a bunch of voluntary reporting opportunities for corporates as well. But what I would like to call it is that it's probably the most complicated landscape for anyone to navigate at the moment. You've got these financial materiality focused reporting frameworks, like all the buzzwords you hear, TCFD, et cetera, and then you now have these more double materiality approach type reporting from, the SDG goals to a CDP to a science-based target setting. All of these, I call it the alphabet soup of the 21st century. So I think the first challenge is, how do you navigate this alphabet soup? And how do you know what is important for your company in terms of the voluntary reporting that you need to do? And how do you allocate resources, right, versus your day-to-day day-to-day business operations and other more strategic topics when it comes to sustainability, like the business model transformations that you should be thinking about as an organization. So I think that's the first thing. And then secondly, as well, if you look at all of these, what I call voluntary reporting standards, actually, it's very confusing as well. If you look at ESG ratings, across whether that's Dow Jones or, FTSE for Good or Sustainalytics, they have different structures, they have different indicators, they have different definitions, different evaluation methodologies. And what you end up with is actually pretty contradicting results. The same company could be ranked and considered to be really good at tackling health and safety in one rating, but actually say another rating can say it's doing an appalling job. And at the same time, you can be being told you're really good at supply chain management and social impact on that. And then the other time, you're not in another rating. So I think it's really difficult for executives to navigate the alphabet soup and then deal with these inconsistencies around ESG index. And that's, I think, where a lot of teams that can help organizations navigate this situation.
Now we have set the foundation of the first 2 hours, recording and reporting. We can discuss the final step, reducing. How and what can companies do to reduce their environmental impact?
We believe we're right in the middle of the biggest transition humanity's ever faced, which is the energy transition. And the way that we have consumed energy has actually resulted in the environmental crisis that we're facing right now. So your question around how can we reduce environmental impact, we believe there are 4 levers that every corporate can pull in order to reduce the impact to the environment. First is they need to electrify their operations. So if your operation still heavily relies on fossil fuels, gases, oil-based products, then you really need to think about how do you electrify your key processes in some of your facilities. Second lever to pull is actually to reduce the energy use. So once you've electrified everything, how do you become more effective and efficient as an organization in order to reduce the energy that you need to run your business? And the third lever that you need to pull is then replace all of your energy source with renewable energy. In that case, you can truly make an impact from a decarbonization perspective. And last but not least, something Billy touched on very early on, which is really your scope 3. So other than looking after your own emissions, electrifying it, reducing energy use and replacing the energy source, the last thing you need to do and the last lever you can pull is engage your entire value chain to make sure that they are also embarking on the same decarbonization journey that you are on.
Yeah, I can share a real case with the audience without mentioning any names for sure. We recently worked with a logistic company on their greenhouse gas emission reduction roadmap, and we asked them to define some short-term, mid-term, and long-term target and KPI from their operations. At the end of the day, around 75-80% of this target are focusing on the source they own and from the generation of electricity or steam that they purchase, which are covering Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. Only around 20-25% of this target are aimed at reducing Scope 3 emissions in like cargo transportation or in their supply chains. One of the main reason is that they can only see the numbers in their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, and without any tracking or control mechanism to understand how big of an impact is from their Scope 3 emissions. After we have our study exercise with them, we found that 73% of their overall greenhouse gas emission is from Scope 3. I believe like 19 is from Scope 1 and 8 from Scope 2. Out of the 70% of Scope 3, we select the category with the highest impact to start our reduction exercise, and which I believe is the upstream transportation and the purchase good and service. Everyone wants to see immediate improvement from this kind of improvement exercise. That's why we start from focusing on the most impacted items and then work our way down the list. Say, for example, we suggest our clients to centralize their supply network instead of maintaining a global supply chain with the lead of a lot of ocean transportations, to consolidate their material suppliers which are closer to their facility, shorten the distance can be one of the way to reduce supply chain carbon footprint. If there's certain suppliers which are quite far away from them, we suggest rail transportation over road transportation with less emission. So we are doing this kind of exercise with our customer on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you both for your time and insightful sharing just now. For our audience and business leaders whose company are on the journey, what is the final tips and advice you would like to share with them?
China has committed to hit the peak of carbon emission by 2030 and become carbon neutral by 2060. Plus, we have the Climate Action Plan 2050 in Hong Kong. There are a lot of available resources and support provided by the government to MNC and to SME in order for them, for the governments to meet these commitments. One of the examples is the Green and Sustainable Finance Grant Scheme from Hong Kong MA, Hong Kong Monetary Authorities. The scheme will provide subsidies to the applicants to cover the expenses on green bond insurance and external review services. The company will then have the capital to spend on improvement projects, such as installation on solar panels, improvement of the chiller efficiency, and save some electricity. There are also similar schemes provided by CIC, Construction Industry Council, to different parties in the construction industry in Hong Kong. So financially, a lot of support are provided by the government. And for internal process, corporation need to start engaging with their suppliers, building the greenhouse gas emission inventories, get some sense on how much they need to spend to become carbon neutrals, then join the others to establish the carbon emission roadmap.
Well, I'm a strong believer that there are no excuses anymore. As we talked about in today's podcast, the technologies are there for us to do most of what we need to do. As Billy mentioned, the funding is there, the support is there to do the investments that you need to do to start your sustainability journey. So there is really no excuse not to do anything. And I think it's better doing something than doing nothing at all. So depending on where you are in your journey, there might be different things that you can accelerate on. For example, if you're just in the beginning, then make sure individuals in your organizations are very aware of the current climate crisis. It is not something that's happening in the future, but it's happening right now to us. If you're in more advanced stages of your sustainability journey, then use what you know and help others, right? Help provide transparency and share with others what you're doing and come up with some action plans that can be deployed to your ecosystems as well. So that would be my final advice to everyone listening to this podcast today.
I think sustainability is good for our planet. It's also good for our business as well. So it's no excuse not to tackle that issue. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks for listening to our episode on sustainability. Hopefully, you'll find this conversation insightful in how you can implement the 3 R's: recording, reporting, and reducing. To learn more on what business can do today, check out the links on our show notes. We'll see you again in our next episode on Business on There.
My name is Giuliana Auinger, and I'm a Vice President at Schneider Electric.
My name is Billy Lai. I'm the Deputy Director of Knowledge Solution in SGS Hong Kong.
And you're listening to the Business on Air podcast by Microsoft.